You wake in the frozen corridors of Whitehall. The walls sweat with damp. The torches cast trembling shadows across stone. And yet what presses most upon you is not the darkness, but the whispers. Voices that never speak your name directly, but carve you open with every syllable. They say Mary Tudor, the cherished sister of a king who never loved without a condition. They say you were England's Juliet. The crown placed upon your head was not English. It was French, and in that detail the nightmare begins. The air itself reeks of betrayal. The Tudor name gleams in chronicles, but beneath the surface it is only a mausoleum. What is a dynasty, if not a graveyard draped in silk? Those born within do not live as children. They are sculpted as sacrifices. Adored, yes. Radiant, yes. But every act of affection is also a sentence. Every royal smile, a wound concealed beneath velvet. Mary walks this corridor like a ghost who has not yet died, her shadow flickering along the stone, her fate already whispered before she breathes it. She is not merely a sister or a bride, she is a hostage of power. To love her is to barter with nations. To touch her hand is to weigh kingdoms in your palm. And you, wandering these halls, begin to sense the paradox. She was both victim and accomplice, both player and pawn in a theatre that devoured its own. And as the voices fade, you realize the Tudor dynasty is not a family. It is a ritual of blood. And Mary Tudor is its most beautiful offering. Richmond Palace, 1496. You hear the muffled laughter of children echoing through painted halls. Though even laughter here carries the weight of prophecy. Mary, the youngest daughter of Henry VII and Elizabeth of York, opens her eyes into a world where every cradle is already a throne in waiting, every lullaby a negotiation. She is wrapped not only in linen but in expectation, a living coin of alliance and survival, and there, beside her, a boy with a restless gaze, Henry. He is her brother, her mirror, her anchor. In the nursery, they are simply children, chasing shadows, whispering secrets beneath tapestries that smell of wax and dust. Yet even here, affection is sharpened like a blade. A hand offered in play becomes practice for a handshake of power. A promise between siblings is not innocence, it is rehearsal for betrayal. Their bond is fierce, radiant, volatile. Mary looks at Henry with a child's devotion, never knowing that one day his love would bind her as tightly as chains. He gazes at her beauty, her charm, already sensing that she will be the perfect weapon in his future games of state. Within this golden cage, affection and calculation are the same breath. And so you wonder, what happens when love collides with the machinery of dynastic ambition? Does it preserve the heart, or does it hollow it? For Mary and Henry, the answer will come in crowns and graves. The years pass, and beauty becomes Mary's curse. Courtiers whisper of her as the pearl of England, the sister who outshines queens with her grace. Yet in the Tudor world, beauty is not a blessing, it is currency. The more radiant her smile, the higher the price demanded. By 1514, her brother Henry VIII sees not a sister, but a bargaining chip. France must be appeased, alliances must be sealed, and so Mary's youth is traded for peace. You sit beside her in the carriage as it rattles toward the coast. The autumn air claws through the cracks, carrying the smell of salt and iron. Behind you lies England, your home, your language, your childhood games with Henry. Ahead, only the endless grey of the Channel. The sea rises and falls like a black lung, as if it is swallowing your laughter, your future. Your very name, they call it a wedding, but you feel the truth, it is a ransom. Mary Tudor will not cross these waters as a bride. She crosses as collateral. Every wave is a reminder that her body is not her own, her will not her own. In the distance, France looms like a crypt, waiting to close its doors around her. And so the first great irony is sealed, adored by all, yet powerless in herself. For in the game of kings, Mary is not chosen. She is used. Paris receives her like a jewel stolen from another crown. The bells toll for celebration, but their echoes feel more like a funeral dirge. Mary Tudor, barely 18, steps into the palace of an old man, Louis XII of France. Grey-haired, aching, his body already collapsing under the weight of time. To him, she is not a bride, but a remedy, a chance to forge unity with England through her flesh. The wedding is painted in gold and velvet, yet beneath the pageantry lies the grotesque truth. Picture the night, a young woman draped in white, her hands trembling, her heart locked behind silence. Across from her, the king frail, desperate, clinging to her beauty as if it could renew his fading strength. In that chamber, love is not present. Only duty, only the cold mechanics of alliance. The warning was given, and here the horror takes form. You feel the chill of the sheets, the weight of expectation pressing like a stone against her chest. Mary does not cry, for tears are a luxury denied to queens. She endures, her silence sharper than any scream. For what is this marriage, if not Europe itself, forcing youth against decay, binding innocence to corruption? Louis clings to her, but his reign beside her will be brief. Already, the winter of his body tightens around him, and Mary, crowned in foreign frost, waits unknowingly for the grave to open. 3 months. That is all it takes for the crown of France to turn to ash in Mary's hands. Louis XII, her husband, her jailer, her frail winter king, collapses beneath the weight of his years. His death leaves her not free, but stranded an 18-year-old widow in a foreign land. Draped in black, her body still considered a political prize. The French court closes in. You see them in the corridors, cloaked in velvet and suspicion, their eyes carving her figure as if it were a map of opportunity. They murmur of her beauty, her youth, her vulnerability. They do not speak to her. They speak around her, over her, as though she were already dead and only her dowry remained alive. Each smile is a calculation, each glance a reminder that she is alone, unmoored. A foreign queen without a throne. In the silence of her chamber, the loneliness presses like ice. The tapestries, embroidered with battles and saints, watch her like witnesses who will not intervene. Power has fled from her hands, leaving only the terror of what comes next. A widow is not neutral. She is a commodity waiting to be claimed. And yet, in this void of despair, a thought begins to burn, dangerous, reckless, human. If her brother traded her for peace, if France sought to chain her again, then perhaps the only escape left is not through duty, but through love. She has worn the crown of France, she has worn the shroud of widowhood, and now she dares to wear something far more dangerous, her own will. In the early months of 1515, while the echoes of Louis XII's death still haunt the French court, Mary Tudor chooses rebellion. She looks not to thrones or treaties, but to the man beside her, Charles Brandon, Duke of Suffolk. Her brother's closest friend, her escorts sent to bring her safely home. Yet safety is a lie. Love has already seized them both. You walk with them through the dim corridors of France, where each whisper could become a weapon, each glance a report sent back to Henry. Mary knows her brother's temper. She has seen how swiftly affection turns to fury. To marry without his consent is not mere disobedience, is treason. The penalty could be exile, imprisonment, even death. And still she chooses. She takes Brandon's hand, and in secret vows herself to him. Not as a pawn, but as a woman. This union is carved from both terror and desire. It is the spark that will ignite the Suffolk bloodline, a line born not from the machinery of diplomacy, but from defiance. Yet beneath its passion lies dread. For in the Tudor world, even love is haunted. To betray the king is to invite the executioner's blade. To betray the heart is to die slowly inside. Mary chose the blade, and history would bleed from it. The Channel once again swallows the horizon, but this crossing is different. Mary is no longer a pawn being ferried to France. She is a fugitive bride, returning to England with the man her brother never permitted her to take. Each wave that slams against the hull feels like the drumbeat of a coming execution. The secret marriage is no longer secret. The news gallops ahead of them, reaching Henry VIII like a spark to dry tinder. His fury is legendary. Imagine the king pacing in Whitehall, his broad frame trembling, his face red with betrayal. Charles Brandon was his friend, his confidant, the man he trusted to escort his sister home. Instead, he returns not as a servant of the crown, but as Mary's husband. To Henry, this is theft, humiliation, treason. His love for his sister collides with his hunger for obedience, and the clash is volcanic. Mary and Brandon step onto English soil as if it were a scaffold. Every glance from a courtier is a verdict, every silence an accusation. Execution is not just possible, it is expected. And yet, when brother and sister meet, the blade does not fall. Henry's affection restrains his hand. But mercy, in the Tudor world, is not gentle. It is a pause, a delay, another kind of cruelty. For on this knife's edge, survival demands payment. And Mary will soon learn that mercy can wound more deeply than wrath. The axe was spared, but the chains were not. Henry VIII, soothed by time and persuasion, allowed Mary and Charles Brandon to live. Yet survival carried its own execution, an execution of wealth, of freedom, of dignity. The king fined them with merciless precision, stripping their fortune as if love itself could be weighed, measured, and taxed. And in his court it could. You feel the grotesque irony settle like dust. Their devotion, their defiance, their stolen vows reduced to coin. Love had been bought, and now it had to be paid for. Every jewel pawned, every estate surrendered, became proof that passion itself had a price. Even in triumph, they were diminished, shackled not by iron, but by debt to the crown. Mary withdrew then, stepping away from the center of the storm. No longer Queen of France, no longer a glittering prize in her brother's games. She slipped into quieter domestic life with Brandon. Yet even in retreat, she could not escape the shadow of power. Her blood was Tudor blood, and it marked her children like an invisible curse. The halls grew quieter, but the whispers did not. In their union lay seeds that would one day crack the foundations of England itself. For the Suffolk line, born of rebellion, would inherit not peace, but peril. And so the story moves from Mary's sacrifice to the children, who would carry its burden. From the quiet chambers of Mary Tudor and Charles Brandon came children who carried within them the most dangerous inheritance in England, the mingling of Suffolk and Tudor blood. Their daughter Frances Brandon would grow to embody this peril, for in her veins ran the silent claim of royalty, a thread that could unravel dynasties. You can almost see Mary watching her children at play, the candlelight trembling against their faces, unaware that each laugh, each breath, is already entangled with the machinery of succession. In the eyes of others, they were not merely children, but living symbols, their lineage a weapon waiting to be drawn. For what is blood in the Tudor age, if not both blessing and curse? Frances would marry Henry Grey, and from that union would come Lady Jane, Grey, a granddaughter, whose name would be etched not in joy, but in tragedy. Jane, the quiet scholar, the reluctant queen, would inherit not only the brilliance of her mind, but the doom of her grandmother's choice. Mary's defiance in marrying for love seemed a personal victory, yet history twists it into something darker. The Suffolk bloodline became a shadowed corridor leading straight to the scaffold. What began as rebellion in France would echo across generations, until the crown itself became both inheritance and executioner. Mary had thought she had chosen her heart. In truth, she had chosen the fate of England's future martyrs. The bloom withers early. By 1533, Mary Tudor, once the radiant rose of England and fleeting Queen of France, withers under the weight of sickness. She is only 37 when death takes her in Suffolk, far from the gilded palaces where her fate had first been written. The woman who once defied kings now lies silent, her body emptied of struggle, her heart stilled after a life carved by sacrifice. They bury her first in Bury St. Edmund's Abbey, the chants of monks rising into the vaulted dark, incense curling like a final crown of smoke. Yet even in death, her rest is not secure. When the abbey falls to the ruin of Henry's dissolution, her remains are moved to St. Mary's Church, as if her ghost could never find peace, only exile. The marble slabs above her whisper not triumph but erasure, and yet a grave is never just a grave. Her tomb, quiet, unadorned compared to those of her brother or her niece, becomes a symbol of the forgotten queen, the one who shaped destiny not by ruling, but by bleeding silently into the soil of history. She is overshadowed, silenced, and still, her choices ripple outward. The fall of Mary Tudor is not the end. It is the first collapse, the reminder that mortality claims even those born with crowns pressed against their skin. But her legacy, buried with her, waits to rise again through the children who would pay for her defiance. From Mary's silent grave, the shadow lengthens. It reaches through her daughter, Frances Brandon, whose marriage to Henry Grey bound Suffolk ambition to Tudor legitimacy. In their household, history sharpened its blade. For Frances carried her mother's blood, the blood of Henry VII and Elizabeth of Yorkand through it, a claim that could not be ignored. You see the web tightening after the death of Edward VI in 1553, the boy king, frail and dying, sought to preserve his Protestant legacy against the Catholic claims of his half-sister, Mary Tudor, Henry VIII's daughter. And so he looked to another Merinotte, the Queen of France long buried, but her granddaughter's line. Frances Brandon's child, Jane Grey, became the vessel of this desperate scheme. Jane, pale and bookish, raised in a world of scripture and obedience, never asked for a crown. Yet the Suffolk bloodline, born from Mary Tudor's defiant marriage, had grown into a weapon. It was not love now, but ideology that carved its path. A girl of 16 was thrust forward, her Tudor ancestry twisted into a shield against Rome. The irony is grotesque. Mary Tudor, who once risked death to marry for love, had given birth to a legacy where love was irrelevant, and survival meant wearing a crown that killed. The Suffolk inheritance was not a gift, it was a curse disguised as legitimacy, and soon its price would be paid in blood. The machinery of succession grinds like iron teeth, merciless and blind. Edward VI, son of Henry VIII, is dying young, his body wasting as if the crown itself has consumed him. But he fears what will follow his last breath. His Catholic half-sister, Mary Tudor, daughter of Catherine of Aragon, poised to inherit and overturn his Protestant reforms. To Edward, this is not just a dynastic issue, it's the soul of England at stake. So the council turns to bloodlines, drawing tangled lines across parchment. And there, in the shadows of genealogy, they find her, Lady Jane Grey, great-granddaughter of Henry VII through Mary Tudor, Queen of France. It is Mary's defiance, her forbidden marriage to Charles Brandon, that has placed this claim in Edward's hands. He seizes it, desperate, fashioning a crown not from right, but from fear. Picture the grotesque symmetry. One Mary must be blocked by another Mary's blood. A girl of 16, bookish and devout, is chosen not for who she is, but for who she is not. Jane Grey is crowned in calculation, a puppet raised to deny another's rise. In this cold transaction, innocence becomes weapon. Queenship is not a blessing, but a barricade, built of flesh and bone. And in the clash between two Marys, one buried, one waiting, the fragile Jane is thrust forward. A child crowned not to rule, but to prevent. The bells toll, but their sound feels hollow, like iron striking against a coffin. Lady Jane Grey, barely 16, is led forward in trembling silence. Her body is slight, her hands pale from study rather than rule, yet the weight of a kingdom is forced upon her shoulders. You stand beside her, watching as the crown is lowered, the gold glinting like a predator's eye. You feel it with her, the cold metal pressing into your skull, heavier than bone, heavier than breath. It is not glory that settles there, but dread. The crowd stares, their faces unreadable, as if they already know this coronation is not a beginning but an execution in disguise. Jane whispers scripture under her breath, clinging to faith as the walls close in. Her reign is no triumph, only a shadow, a 9-day ghost echoing the fate of her grandmother Mary Tudor in France. Both were crowned too young, too unwilling. Their queenships, more a punishment than a prize. Every moment of Jane's rule bleeds with suspense. She knows the people murmur for Mary, daughter of Catherine of Aragon. She knows her crown is hollow, balanced on quicksand. And as the days collapse into one another, you see the crown not as a circle of gold, but as a noose of state tightening around her neck. 9 days. That is all history allows her. The Tower of London looms, its stones soaked in centuries of dread. Within its walls, Jane Grey waits no longer a queen, only a girl of 16, stripped of her borrowed crown. The corridors reek of damp and iron, every echo a reminder that here, innocence is irrelevant. The machinery of power has turned, and Mary I, Henry VIII's daughter, now reigns. To secure her throne, Jane must die. For her throne, Jane must die. You walk with her toward the scaffold, each step trembling, each breath shallow. The crowd gathers, their silence heavier than any roar. On the platform, the block waits, dark and slick, carved by the necks that came before. Jane kneels, her voice breaking as she whispers a prayer. Lord, into thy hands I commend my spirit. The words rise like fragile wings, but they cannot carry her away. The executioner lifts his axe. The blade gleams, a crown inverted into death. And in that instant, history twists into cruel symmetry. Mary Tudor, Queen of France, forced into marriage for politics. Jane Grey, Queen of England, forced into coronation for politics. Both women, pawns of dynastic fear, reduced to bodies on which kingdoms wrote their terror. The axe falls. Silence consumes the tower, and Jane, unwilling queen, becomes eternal legend, not for her reign, but for her blood. The axe silences Jane, but it does not end the nightmare. Instead, it spreads like smoke through the Suffolk line, choking every survivor. Frances Brandon, her mother, lives on beneath a shroud of suspicion. The Greys who remain feel the eyes of the crown upon them, each glance a threat, each silence a warning. To be of royal blood is no longer an honor, it is a death sentence, deferred. You imagine the weight pressing on their chests, the knowledge that every banquet could be poisoned with accusation, every letter read as treason. Their lineage, born of Mary Tudor's defiance, is a chain they cannot break. Too close to the throne, yet never permitted to sit upon it forever, trapped in the narrow space where proximity itself is lethal. The curse is not superstition. It is politics, sharpened to a blade. Ambition clings to their name like a disease, even when they seek only survival. To be Grey is to be haunted, not by ghosts, but by the living monarchs who see in them rivals, threats, reminders of instability. Mary Tudor once chose love over power. Her descendants inherited neither. Instead, they bore only suspicion, their every breath weighed against the throne. It is a life half-lived, smothered by the shadow of crowns. The line endures, but not in peace. It endures as a warning, a family cursed by the very blood that should have raised them. The crown shifts once more, and Elizabeth I ascends her, queen of fire and brilliance, yet no less wary of the shadows around her. In her reign, the Greys still linger, survivors of executions, survivors of suspicion. But survival is not freedom. They are not seen as children, mothers. Husbands, they are seen as claims, as rivals, as echoes of a bloodline that refuses to vanish. You can almost hear it in the hush of court, their names spoken in caution, their presence tolerated but never trusted. Elizabeth, fierce in her need to secure the throne, keeps them close yet distant, a reminder that the Suffolk bloodline remains dangerous even in silence. To be alive is itself incriminating when one's veins carry Tudor descent, and so the nightmare stretches into another generation. The Greys live like ghosts wandering under sunlight, their laughter cautious, their futures fragile. They do not plot, yet plots are written upon them. They do not conspire, yet conspiracy clings to their name. The family Mary Tudor birthed is no family at all, it is a perpetual threat, a lingering wound in the fabric of England's succession. Here the story slows, the dread no longer sharp with execution, but heavy with suffocation. It is the weight of living too near the fire, of carrying a shadow that will not lift. Even in Elizabeth's glittering court, the Greys breathe under the same curse. The blood that should ennoble them is the very blood that condemns. History remembers the thunder. It remembers Henry VIII, with his 6 wives and his swollen crown. It remembers Mary, the first, Bloody Mary, whose fires consumed her name in infamy. But Mary Tudor, Queen of France, the sister, the bride, the widow, the rebel slips through the cracks. She is forgotten, erased, a whisper beneath the roar of others. And yet, her shadow lingers more deeply than their monuments. Why? Because her quiet defiance reshaped the bloodline itself. In choosing Charles Brandon for love, she did what no Tudor was meant to do. She broke the machinery, if only for a moment, and in that act, she created a fracture that bled into centuries. Lady Jane Grey, the 9-day queen, would never have existed without Mary's rebellion, nor would the endless suspicion that hounded the Suffolk descendants. You begin to see her not as absent, but as spectral, the unseen hand at the table, the ghost in the corridors, her choices manipulating events long after her burial, forgotten by chronicles, perhaps but inscribed in tragedy upon her bloodline. In horror, this is the cruelest fate, to be silenced in memory, yet cursed to haunt the living. Mary Tudor is not celebrated because she never ruled, never commanded armies, never burned cities, but her defiance ensured that crowns toppled, heads fell, and dynasties trembled. The forgotten queen remains, not in glory, but in the echo of consequences. She is the ghost who never leaves the room. In the Tudor world, love is never innocent. It is a knife, sharpened on the whetstone of ambition, plunged into the hearts of those who dare to feel. Mary Tudor believed she had stolen one moment of freedom, one act of rebellion, when she married Charles Brandon. Love had seemed like salvation. Yet in the cruel arithmetic of dynasties, that joy did not heal it condemned. From that secret vow was born a paradox so grotesque it chills the marrow. The laughter of Mary's marriage bed became the silence of Jane Grey's scaffold. The tenderness of her choice became the weapon that split England's crown. What greater cruelty is there than to see love transformed into execution? A mother's defiance echoing into a granddaughter's death. You must ask yourself, what would you choose? To obey and die inside, or to love and doom your bloodline? Would you trade your children's future for the fleeting taste of happiness? Mary Tudor did, and though she could not foresee it, history punished her choice with relentless precision. This is the Tudor paradox. Blood is never just blood. It is scripture, it is weapon, it is curse. It binds and it kills, weaving crowns and nooses from the same thread. Mary's love was real, and yet, in this world, even love becomes an executioner. The churches of Suffolk stand in silence, their stones weathered by centuries, their shadows heavy with secrets. Step inside and the air chills, as though every breath belongs to the dead. Beneath the worn slabs of St. Mary's Church, Mary Tudor rests, her name carved in stone, her story nearly erased. Yet her presence lingers like a faint echo in the dust. Around her, through the counties of England, lie her descendants, the Greys, the Suffolk scattered in tombs that are less monuments than scars. Each grave is a wound cut into the land, a reminder of crowns never worn, of blood spilt for claims never realized. These are not peaceful resting places. They are reliquaries of unfinished stories, corridors of silence where ambition and grief still whisper. You run your hand along the cold marble and feel not honor, but sorrow. For what is a tomb, if not the residue of choices? Mary chose love, and here lie the echoes of that choice, carved into stone and shadow. The churches endure, but they are haunted. Their bells toll, not only for worship, but for memory, for warning. Every echo reminds us that dynasties do not end at death, they calcify, waiting to be uncovered, waiting to bleed again. And so you leave these stones behind, but they do not release you. The echoes follow, reminding you that history itself is a graveyard, and some scars never heal. Dynasties do not nurture their children, they devour them. In the Tudor world, every cradle was a battlefield, every heartbeat a negotiation. Power consumed those who touched it, swallowing innocence, corrupting love, reducing human lives to pawns upon a board carved from bone. Mary Tudor, Queen of France, stands as the clearest wound in this truth. She was a sister, adored yet sacrificed, a bride given as ransom, a mother whose defiance rippled into tragedy. She was no ruler, no conqueror, and yet her choice to marry for love was the seed from which nightmare blossomed. That seed sprouted into Jane Grey's crown of thorns, into scaffolds and curses, into generations trapped beneath suspicion, and so we return to her shadow. To the ghost of a queen forgotten by chronicles but etched into destiny. Mary's life proves that history is not written by the victors, as the saying goes. It is written by the blood of the forgotten, the ones whose names fade, even as their choices carve the path of nations. You walk away from her grave, but her story does not release you. The question lingers, heavy as stone. If love itself can become a curse, what hope is left for any who dream of freedom beneath the weight of crowns?